China Dreamers, Jason here, helping you dream further and travel farther as always. I'm here with another one of my vlog videos, and just to give you guys an idea, I am a recruiter in China. I do help companies find and place teachers in private or public situations out here, and most of the time I focus on public schools. But in any case, if you're interested in applying through me, you can head to ChinaDreamersESL.com and I'll be happy to help. And today I'm going to go into probably one of the most talked about or asked questions that people get in my industry, and that's how much money am I going to make? And I think that's a great question. It's really tough to give you a solid answer on it, and I don't think most people can give you a really strong answer on it. Now, if you go looking for jobs in China online, you're going to get a lot of like kind of clickbaity numbers thrown at you. Okay, you're going to see like, wow, you're going to make 30,000 RMB a month. Well, sometimes those jobs exist, all right, and maybe you're qualified for it, maybe not. I think most of the time people are not qualified for these crazy like 30,000 RMB a month jobs. Sorry if you actually hear some construction going on. There's a little bit of construction going on above my apartment, but in any case, what's more likely to happen is you'll get more of an entry-level position, right? You're going to get an entry-level position in a public school, or an entry-level position into a training center or an international school, maybe. The international schools usually have a little bit higher criteria, so a lot of times they're looking for people who are already in China, who have already taught for a couple of years, and usually they kind of want more like subject teachers, someone who can teach math or science and English, and it kind of works as like a dual class. They get the ESL aspect and they also get the subject, right? So anyway, it really depends on which kind of school you end up in. And I usually recommend public school because I think public school is the one that you can kind of carry along the furthest, meaning that you have a much better like time to money ratio than you do at the private side of things. So I'll give you an example. I've been a public school teacher for a very long time, and the reason why is because my public school only requires me to do about 15 teaching hours, or actually not even 15 teaching hours, 15 classes of about 40 minutes, right? So that's a very, very, very manageable workload, which then lets me go out and make most of my money on the side. So it lets me run my business. I don't have to grade. I don't have to do any evaluations. I don't have to do any of that stuff. And because I don't have to do any of that stuff, I can run a business in China, without having to worry about giving up a really solid salary from a public school position. So this is fantastic, and for me, I think that if you get into any kind of business or you get into any kind of side work, that the public school system is usually the best. So how much do they pay? And again, this really varies. When I came, it was, I'd say the average salary for someone without a whole lot of experience was about like 9,500 or 10,000 RMB plus a housing allowance of usually about 3,000 or 2,500, somewhere around there. And so in any case, this is around like 1,600 bucks a month plus your housing allowance, okay? All right, well, that sounds terrible compared to Korea, where it's usually like $2,000, right? But the cost of living is much different. And so, when I was in Korea, I was making a much higher salary, but I was saving kind of a similar amount of money. And I was working a lot more. So, you really have to look at situations like this, okay? If you're going to Korea and you're going to teach in a hagwon, which is like their training centers, right? Then you're going to teach 30 classes a week. And you're going to make your $2,200 or $2,100 a month, and your cost of living is going to be higher. So you're teaching double the amount of classes, making a tiny bit more that doesn't really matter because the cost of living completely eliminates it, right? And your lifestyle is not going to be as good. So that's why I ended up coming to China. And then when you factor in side work, it completely changes the game in terms of how much money you can potentially make. So for example, if you're teaching 15 classes a week, you still have the energy to go out and do some side classes or do some side work. And then anyone's guess, really, but quite a few people double their salaries out here. You know, some people more than double it. Some people triple it. And so if you're doing that, then it's crazy, crazy money. And but it just really depends on how much you hustle, right? That is all dependent on how much you want to make and how much you want to hustle, because there's always work. There's always work. So I would say that for the average public school teacher, you're going to make about, you know, let's say $1,500 to $1,800. And if you're living, and plus your housing allowance, right? And if you're living within your means, then, you know, you can probably save between $700 and $1,100 a month just on your salary. And if you do side work, you could possibly save your entire salary or more, and you could make quite a lot of money. So, for example, you know, I save every single thing from my public school job. I don't spend a dime of it. And so, and I've had a couple of years of raises and things like this, so now I save like well over $2,300 a month just because of that. And that's not even everything, right? So, you know, if you really play your cards right in China, you can save quite a lot of money as a teacher. And then, of course, that's not even to say that you have to stay a teacher. So many people move into other industries. I have friends who have moved into being college counselors and things like this. I've had friends who've done acting projects and all sorts of kind of cool stuff that you can get into on the side, which I just don't think is quite as prevalent in some of the other markets. Okay, so that is for the public school teacher. And I think that that flexibility allows you to make a lot more money. But some people don't like to hustle, right? Some people just want everything encapsulated in their salary. And then maybe the private schools or the international schools might be a little bit better. So how does that work out? Well, usually you're going to teach more like 25 classes a week. And so you're teaching 10 more classes a week. Usually you're going to do evaluations. Usually you're going to do testing. Usually you're going to grade homework. So consider that it's a lot more work off the bat, but you might get 18 to 25,000 RMB per month, okay, compared to what, like 15, 14 if you're, you know, in your public school in Shenzhen or something like this. So yeah, you're gonna make like 11,000 more. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm making 11,000 more. That's a significant amount of money, right? Like, that's a lot. But that's if you're getting 25, okay? Now, first of all, that's maybe not so realistic if it's your first job and you're coming over here. You probably get more like 20, okay? So let's say you get 20 at your first gig at your private school. So you're making 5,000 RMB more than your public school teaching counterpart. All right, well, that's pretty good until you start understanding like how Chinese tax brackets work. And so what happens is like most of the public school companies are very smart in how they put together your contract so that you have different buckets of money. Your housing is different than your main salary, and then you have a lecture remuneration and all this kind of stuff. And the way it ends up working out is you pay far fewer taxes than most of the people going to the private school side of things, so it kind of evens out almost. Now, it doesn't need to even out totally. So let's say you make like 2,000 or 3,000 more at your private school than you do at your public school, and that's not factoring in any kind of side work or any kind of thing like that. Well, you're also working almost twice as many classes, or at least two-thirds as many, two-thirds more classes, right? And you're doing all of these extra side responsibilities, and you'll probably have to do things like demo classes and things like this. So for an extra $500 a month, you're doing more than twice the work. And then, when you factor in you could easily make up that amount of money doing side work, public schools start to make a lot more sense. But, you know, a lot of times when people come to China, they're kind of number chasing. You know, they kind of see like, oh, well, this place is this much, this place is this much, and they don't really factor in all of the really like small details. And this is a huge mistake. This can really change your experience from being like a very profitable one to one where you're kind of miserable. You know, some people like they make this decision just based on these sort of like tiny extraneous things, like, oh well, I'm gonna go to this place because it's paying me like 1,000 RMB more. Well, 1,000 RMB is nothing, nothing, nothing. And you know, when you're really kind of focused on just the number, the big number, you really start to forget about other things that are more effectual. So, for example, one of the great things about public school is the vacation time. You know, you're going to get 3 months of vacation time. If you're going to go to a training center, you're going to get 10 days of vacation time, and a lot of times it's like 5 paid days and 5 unpaid days, right? So, you know, this is a huge, huge difference in quality of life. And a lot of times, like, the training center teachers will work at night, which is great for some people, I think. I mean, you know, you have to consider that some people are night owls. They really like to, you know, go finish their classes at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. and they can still kind of go out and have fun after. But most people, like, when you finish a long day of work, you want to go home and sleep. And having that night schedule can make it feel like you don't have a life, because, you know, you wake up in the morning, you don't really have anything to do, and then you go to work at like 2 p.m., and then you come home, and then again, you don't really have anything to do except for sleep. So it ends up being kind of a boring life sometimes. Whereas, you know, if you have kind of a normal like 8 to 4 p.m. kind of job, like, go out after work, you know, you can come home, take a nap, you can go to the gym, you know, you could do a much more regular kind of life, I think, with that sort of schedule. So yeah, that's my bias, all right? I'm very biased towards public schools because they treated me incredibly well, and I also just think they're more steady, okay? But in any case, you can make a little bit more at a training center, or you can make a lot more at an international school. But the international schools, they usually require 2 years of experience in whatever subject you're going to be teaching. And then in addition to that, you know, you might get your 25,000 RMB salary, but again, usually for the tax purposes, it's kind of poorly structured, and it doesn't end up being as much more as you would think. So someone with like a 25,000 RMB salary plus a housing allowance of like 3,000 RMB, you know, you might be making more like 6,000 or 7,000 more than a public school teacher. Not this massive 11,000 gap that you think. And 6,000 or 7,000 is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. That's like $1,000 a month. That's huge, right? That's like $10,000, $12,000 a year difference. But like I said, because of the prevalence of side work, it's kind of not this impossible gap. And when you actually put together all the side work and you consider that you don't have all the extra responsibilities of evaluating and grading, you know, it kind of evens out, to be honest with you. I mean, like, I've been qualified to teach in an international school for several years now, and I haven't made that jump because to me it sounds like a lot more work, and actually I would make less money now. And that's because I've developed all of my private clients over, you know, lots of, you know, several years, right? It's taken time, but now if I were to jump to international school, I would lose money, a lot of money. So consider this, you know, consider this when you're choosing what kind of school to, you know, to teach at. So anyway, I didn't really answer the whole question of how much overall you can save. So at a public school, if you were just to take that salary, you could save probably between $700 and $1,000 a month. If you go to an international school and you're making like that big 25,000 RMB salary, you know, I think it would be very possible for you to save more like $1,500 to $1,800 a month. If you go to a training center and you're making around 20, I think it's possible for you to save like, you know, 12 to, let's say, 14, 1,500 a month. If you do side work at a public school, you could make the sky's the limit, right? I don't want to put a cap on it because it really depends on how much you hustle, you know. You could make 3 times your salary. Some people do. Most people don't. Okay, I would say most people try to do like, you know, 4 classes on the side or something at about $50 a class, and so they make an extra $200 a week, so an extra $800 a month, so an extra 800 plus your 1,000, so 1,800 in savings. about the same as the international school teachers save, right? Because of the tax situation. So that's pretty much the breakdown of how much you can expect to make. Now, how does this vary to other countries? All right, and this is one that really shoots a lot of people in the foot. When you're considering China versus Korea versus Japan, the real difference is how much money you can make. All right. Now, if you're only interested in cultural aspects and things like this, you could make arguments for any of the countries. I think people will tell you like Japan is so cool. If you go to Japan for a couple weeks, everyone's like, "Oh, it's so cool." But that's usually, they're going to Tokyo and it's super clean and modern and all this kind of stuff. But I think most cities in China are pretty modern, and most cities in Korea are pretty modern. So like that's not this huge variance of anything. But a lot of people love Japanese culture. A lot of people love their media, this kind of stuff. So if it's purely based on culture, then this isn't the conversation for you. However, if you are wanting to travel a lot and you're wanting to make a lot of money, then China is probably the best choice. And the reason why I think that is that, like I said, you could save approximately $1,200 a month with your normal job pretty easily if you do maybe one extra class at your public school or whatever. So if you're in Korea, first of all, private lessons are really restricted, and second of all, the cost of living is higher, so it eats into your ability to save. And I'd say most people save between $500 to $1,000 in Korea, maybe. I think that $1,000 is really tough, to be honest with you. I think you're more going to hit around $500 to $700 if you live in like Seoul or you live in Busan or a place like this, right? And then of course you're restricted in terms of your private lessons. And so, you're going to save similarly to like the first entry-level public school teacher in China, except you don't have any opportunity to make money on the side. So that automatically puts it behind in terms of saving money. And then also most Korean jobs are these private school jobs, and you usually only have about 10 days of vacation, so you're not traveling anywhere except for in Korea. And that's cool. Like, it's cool to travel in Korea. Like, if it's your first go around, you're gonna be like, wow, I got 10 days to look around Korea. That's amazing. Okay. But then, like, I'll give you an example. Next week I'm going to Nepal, and I'm going to be in Nepal for 3 weeks, and it's actually not going to take hardly anything away from my savings plans, and I even got my plane ticket paid for. So, when you start thinking about all of that kind of stuff, it really becomes an idea of, all right, well, if your idea is to save, definitely China, because the cost of living in Korea is higher, the salaries are similar. Japan, the salary is a little bit higher, I think, maybe a little bit higher, not that much higher, and the cost of living is substantially higher. And so a lot of teachers who are teaching in Japan, they barely save any money. All right, well, that's not usually kind of in line with what most people are trying to do when they're taking this journey, right? They want to save and they want to travel, all right? Now, you might live in China where it's a lot more crowded and more chaotic and dirty. Well, it's not really that dirty. Like, I'm in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is actually a really clean, beautiful, green city. And Shanghai is similarly a beautiful city. Okay, so there are a lot of beautiful, huge metropolises out here. But in any case, you might be attracted to those countries in terms of the cultural stuff. But then if your goals are more to travel and save, China is really kind of the place for you, because you'll get like 3 months of vacation versus 10 days in the other countries. You'll get a lot more chances to work on the side, which in most countries that's kind of not really embraced. Certainly if you're working for private schools, like that's usually not what's going to end up being acceptable for them. So definitely I think China for traveling and saving is going to be your best destination. And of course I'm biased, okay? So take my word with a grain of salt. But like I said, when I originally came to Asia, Japan was my focus. I really loved Japanese culture, everything Japan. Wow, so cool, so cool. but like there's no comparison to being broke in Japan and kind of well off in China, right? Like if you're well off in China, you can live incredibly well. Like you can have an incredibly convenient, awesome lifestyle. It's much better than to be broke or check to check in another country. It just is. And then you can travel to Korea and travel to Japan. Like going to Korea round trip from here where I am in Shenzhen, like if I go to the Hong Kong airport, it's about $250 round trip. Why not just visit Korea? You want to go to Japan, it's like what, $350. You can go round trip from Hong Kong to Japan and go experience Japan for a week or 2 weeks or something like this. And you can go as often as you really want, you know? You could stay for a month in one of these countries if you save the money for that, right? So in my mind, it just makes much more sense to work in the place where you can save the most money and have the most time, and then to visit the places that you're interested in. That's why I'm going to Nepal. I've been to Malaysia, and I've been to the Philippines, and all sorts of really cool countries just because I have the time to do that. So keep that in mind as well. Anyway, I hope this kind of helps you parse out like what it's like to work here in terms of the salaries and what to expect. Maybe I'll go into a more detailed video sometime about like each country's benefits and weaknesses, and maybe that'll kind of give you an idea of how I think about it. And of course, I'm not the ultimate authority on everything, right? But I can definitely give you a very different perspective since I'm a recruiter and I've seen people come and go for years and years and years, instead of just being like, you know, I'm a foreign teacher and I've had, you know, what, 2 experiences or 3 experiences with different school work situations. No, I mean, I've had hundreds of teachers come to Shenzhen, and I've seen how they've done or how they have done poorly, and so I can kind of give you you know, a more macro idea of how it goes out here. And in any case, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time. All right, have a great one, China Dreamers.